You are listening to the Light Overtime Podcast with David Sargent and Korey Bartos. Hey, David.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm pretty good. We've been talking about doing this for a good long time.
Oh, it's been a full year, I think.
Yeah, I decided to totally, screw off and go to Asia, so that didn't help.
Yeah, that's you damn bastard.
All right, so this is the first episode of the Light Overtime Podcast. I think we should just start off with who you are and your experience in the world of crafting light into images and.
Yeah, I mean, well, before I even describe who I am, we should probably describe what this podcast is going to be about, right? Like, this isn't really just a photography podcast, right? It's kind of like an everything for makers, crafters, creators podcast. Is that correct?
This is our all of that happens outside of the realm of our everyday jobs and lives.
Sure.
So the brilliance between Light Overtime podcast being Light Overtime is how you take a picture of a video, and this is our Light Overtime because I like doing this. I think it's a lot of fun, but it's work at the end of the work week. So I think it's exciting to explore. We'll get into some of the things you do not photo related, and that'll be a huge topic on this show, and some of the other things that I'm doing. And hell, maybe we'll have some local folks on here and there, and we'll discuss what they do as well. But yeah, it's
Sure.
it's the nature of the world we live in right now. Is we're all doing a little bit of light overtime.
Yeah. So I guess I'll get started. I'm David. Nice to meet you guys. I have been shooting professionally photography for the last 10, almost 11 years now. The origin story of that is that in 2011, December, a couple of friends invited me to go to New York. And we had this insane adventure from Flint on using Amtrak trains from Flint to Chicago to New York, and we spent a total of like 64 hours on trains. And with that, we spent like 2 or 3 days in New York during the the Occupy Wall Street stuff. And so I was really into journalism then. I was our editor for our high school paper or whatever. So I took a little HP flip camera. It's around here somewhere, but it's like, I think I must have had like maybe a 64 megabyte card or something on it. Like I could take a couple hundred crappy JPEGs or a few videos. And so I started out by taking a bunch of videos, and I was like, oh, I can do nothing more with this now. So I deleted most of the videos I took. And just started taking pictures, and it was a lot of fun. And I never really got to experience that before then. I was 17 or 18. I think I was 18. And yeah, it was a ton of fun. So since then, I've spent 10 years just honing the craft, enjoying the process, and it's been a ride, man. Done a lot of weddings. I do mostly landscapes, a lot of wildlife, astrophotography. So I kind of dip my toes into lots of different areas of photography. And lately, if we want to just jump right into the other stuff, I've been roasting coffee. So for the last year and a half, actually, I've been trying to become a source for specialty coffee in my local community. And so I've been providing coffee to my farmers markets, and that's a lot of fun. We can talk more about that later. But that's me.
Love to hear it. Yeah, I actually, I think you briefly told me that story, that origin story a little bit, but I totally had forgotten. That's wicked, man.
Yeah.
Sounds like a hell of a trip.
It was.
Yeah, well, a little bit about me. I started this photo video journey, at least, as a Tumblr blogger back in the day. I had a blog called, if you're familiar with Tumblr in the early 2010s, Fuck Yeah Effects Pedals, which was, maybe I'll bleep that, I'm not sure, but that's the name of the blog, and basically it's all things guitar effects, and that led me to going to YouTube, and YouTube led me to cameras, and then I found out very quickly that I actually preferred a great deal of the creating photo videos more so than I did turning a passion of mine, which was playing guitar, into a job. And so then I was doing that for various businesses. I would do product photos and things like that. That led me into when I was getting back into college. understanding that I was already doing a lot of marketing stuff for people, and then I got into basically full time marketing content creation. So I've worked for my public library, I've worked for a camp every summer for the last like 5 years. I did a short jaunt of being a travel YouTuber, and then I work for a company now that does some manufacturing in a realm maybe we'll talk about later. But yeah, so I basically everything that I do that I think is fun, I've turned into photo video, from adventures to traveling Japan to traveling all over the U.S. to shooting a lot of dogs, which is like, dog photography is one of my probably favorite things of all time. And yeah, so that led me and David to meeting each other because I had a friend that I went to college with who happens to be his brother in law. And he was like, "Well, this guy does photos. You might like him." I think that's probably somehow how we got
I think
connected.
he probably just mentioned your name. I
Yeah.
looked you up, saw you did cool stuff. We followed and didn't talk for like years or
Oh yeah,
something
it was like four
until
or
something
five
came up.
years. Yeah, it was crazy. It was super nuts. So yeah, very fun stuff. David does some workshops and stuff that we'll probably get talking to because I think he's got one coming up at some point as well. But I think like really the first time we officially met was I came up and did some BTS for that and hung out to check out one of your workshops, and
Yeah.
that was a lot of fun. So yeah, and then ever since then, I mean, I have to have somebody that I talk about all this nerdy crap to, or else my non-camera friends will stop talking to me completely. So
I'm right there with you.
that's me. That's David. I think I have a couple of topics we're going to run through today, and I'd love to start with, especially after COVID kind of stifled our ability to create for a while. 2022 for me was the first year that I got back into creating at a pretty high level, where I was kind of always making stuff. And I want to start with what your either most exciting or challenging, or I guess your biggest creating experience of 2022 was, outside of coffee making, that is, unless it is your coffee
well,
making.
so here's the funny thing is, all of the skills I have been building for photography, and I dip my toes into video. I have a YouTube channel for the coffee, so what I'm doing with coffee is heavily intertwined with the photo video skills that I have because I am my own marketer and that is my marketing. I don't pay for marketing, I just post content constantly. So, even though I'd love to say like my workshop last spring was my highlight, and it's always a highlight. The most dominant thing in my mind that I can really just call back to is just how much work with photo and video that I've put into over the course of the last year. Um, Kind of just pipelining everything about coffee to all my potential customers and to people as far as like educational purposes go. So, getting a little bit of experience with product photography, which has probably been one of my weaknesses as far as my photography skills rounding goes. Getting experience with product photography, like in-home lighting, to do very specific things with either my products or for filming me. I am terrible with artificial lighting. It's why I'm outside all the time: landscapes, wildlife, astrophotography, weddings. Even you won't find me with a flash, and I tell my clients that all the time. I'm not an artificial lighting master, expert, amateur at all. I just don't touch flash, but I do have continuous lights for video. So that's what I am really just calling back to right now, is recalling how much work I've put in trying to grow my kind of product photography, videography, and the YouTube channel has probably close to 30 videos now, and it's slowly growing. But if I look at my first couple of videos to my last couple, there's definitely a few different areas that I can for sure see I've grown in. So
Yeah.
that's me. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that journey has been cool because it's happened kind of so fast. Um, it's a hugely niche thing to make coffee content, especially because like a place like Instagram is littered with it. So like to
Hmm.
diversify is so hard. But it looks like, at least you're starting to get a pretty decent following just through people interested in some of the informational stuff or some of the vlog stuff, which was fun to watch.
Yeah, the vlog stuff is fun. That's something I love to consume that kind of content. When Casey was doing his daily vlogs, everybody was watching that stuff, right? And I was right there alongside everybody else and just loving it. And that style of storytelling has always been so interesting to me. And I've always wanted to bring that to my photography, but I've never felt motivated enough to vlog photography because then I feel like it's taking away from the photography. And I consume a lot of that too. Thomas Heaton, Adam Gibbs, those guys are they're YouTubers first, really, but they're amazing photographers. But they've put a whole lot of time and effort into storytelling through video. And somehow they're still able to come out with just incredible world class images doing both of those things at the same time. Now I have a reason with the coffee to kind of do that type of storytelling without worrying too much about the photography, but telling more of a story about my relationship with coffee and photography on a broader sense, not necessarily going super technical into the photography. A lot of it is educational stuff for people who are looking for, like, what type of gear should I buy for coffee and what type of this and that should I try. So I try to hit a lot of different areas with the YouTube channel, and it's fun. It is a lot of fun, but I've grown for sure. It's a small community. It's really small right now, but the people that do follow are really engaged, and I love that. Every single one of them who do come to comment, have a question, it's just an awesome little space to be in.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, places like Instagram are kind of the engagement has dwindled to almost nothing. So I would take a small active community on YouTube over just about anything else, um,
Yeah.
like bar none. Especially like
Oh yeah.
just the stuff that happened while I was traveling. If I could try and emulate that when I get into reviving my channel, I'd be super happy.
So what about you for last year?
I mean, the last year's been pretty weird. Professionally, I think I started to kind of get a better grasp of how I was applying marketing like mindset to creating some of the stuff that I was doing for, say, like the camp that I was working at, or even the company I'm back at now that I was working for last spring. Um, but I haven't had as many lessons in as short of a time as I did doing the travels in the Philippines. Um, so I had a channel briefly with a friend. We went to the Philippines for 2 months from October to November. It was called Korean Cruise. Now it's called J or Cruise. He went back to the Philippines, which is pretty wild. Um, but you know, everybody kind of, especially, I think younger people that are getting into content creation, they're like, oh, it'd be so cool to travel the world and like make content every day and all this other stuff. And it was like, obviously a humbling experience because it's not easy. I've never ever assumed that it was easy. And I didn't assume it was going to be easy going into it. But the challenges that I faced weren't necessarily like, oh, this is hard or anything like that. It was just like, actually existing in a totally different
Yeah.
place and trying to take the most from it while also trying to capture it somehow. I
Yeah.
didn't quite get to the point where I thought I was doing it well or I found a balance, but I definitely walked away with some tools that I didn't have for capturing day to day life or like stuff that seems. I guess, like, you know, if I'm doing day to day content for the company I work for now, trying to turn the mundane experiences that like are mundane because I do them daily into content and tell that story.
Yeah.
It was like a master class on doing that because once you change everything about your environment, you're like, oh, everything is content. That's like the joke, right? Like, so you can see how everything can be content and how you can make good, compelling storytelling with simpler things when you have to, when you're like, oh, everything is wild. Like me actually getting this coffee from this tiny vendor in like a crazy busy wild street or something like that. That is an interesting story. Me trying to find a freaking camera repair shop in the middle of like Cebu City was like, you know, it was wild. You start to see things different. You start to be able to frame like everyday life a little differently, and that was really cool. So that was exciting for me to see how much I could grow in such a short amount of time doing that kind of content.
Yeah, I mean, just watching your stories and watching your videos, you put this particular perspective on it, and we have this lens we're allowed to look through to see how your time is going. And then when I talk to you, it was always these constant little reality checks of, oh, this was difficult today, and I gotta really think about how I'm going to navigate this today. And that's just, there's two very different sides to the pressures involved with what I'm sure you found out pretty early on, and then going through the whole thing. The videos and the content you did make, I love it. I loved every second of it. But the viewers like me, unless we were to talk to you, don't understand all involved like you do.
Yeah, and I mean, especially we did like kind of a podcasty version, like retrospective of like a week at a time kind of deal, and
Mm-hmm.
things like that. It's super easy to just make all of the kind of challenges not really a part of the conversation because you're like, okay, well, here's this giant grab bag of awesome shit we did all week, but let me tell you about the like 16 hours of editing and the like 4-hour nights and waking up, jumping in the car, jumping on bikes, and like getting right after it as soon as we could, and then finding Wi-Fi for 5.5 hours to try and even upload a video. And
Mm.
it was wild. It changed how I deal with stress. It changed how I problem solved and how I could like you know keep my head and my things together while I was in those challenges. It was an awesome time. It was definitely, I'll probably talk about
That's
that trip for the next like 10 years, but
I bet you will. I find it interesting the way you said it changed how I deal with stress. Can you talk about that more?
well, like, so obviously working in marketing and content creation, you're under an enormous amount of stress all the time anyway. You have deadlines, you have things, and you're like, okay, I got to make this
Yeah.
stuff. But when you're like trying to also you're in a relatively developing country, and the Philippines has a very wide spectrum of how developed and underdeveloped certain places are. But we started on an island, a very very small, relatively remote island, where infrastructure was not anything that I was used to. Where like every single thing that I had to do, I either had to get help from somebody to like, hey, how can I try and get a connection so I can actually get this stuff? I was having computer issues and things like that, but I almost attribute the island way of life to, hey man, this stuff is going to get solved when it gets solved. Like obviously work on it, like, but don't get crazy heated about it and be like because like all of a sudden I'm doing like what I attribute to big city life like pressure in a remote chill surfing island. So like
Mm.
it kind of my environment made that pressure feel different, and then I realized it isn't the environment at all, it's how you choose to handle that pressure. So I was able to like adapt because of the environment to not turning that pressure into like a pressure bomb, right? It's like
Mm.
just let it go, like you're working on it. It'll get solved when it gets solved. You have every resource you possibly can have. You have all the people that you need. Like we'll figure it out. We'll get something going to make it work. Like just calm down. So, and I think it kind of started during that time. But I say often, there's a lot of things that I could be fussy about, but this isn't one of them. And I say that to a lot of
Yeah.
stuff. Like people are like, "Well, doesn't that bug you?" And I'm like, I don't know, man. There's a lot of stuff to be fussy about, and it sure as heck ain't this. So, you know,
Now, when we talk, I mean, if we can talk a little bit more about the trip, if you don't mind, I would like to bring up because there was one stressful point that I was on you about all the time, and that was damaging that lens and
yeah,
your trip to trying to find a repair shop, like you
yeah,
said, and then how much of that was out of your control versus the work you had to put in to find the place, and then just waiting. I mean, at that point in time, it was probably what a third of the way through the whole thing
yeah,
or
yeah, yeah.
so, right?
A few weeks for
Um,
sure.
so you kind of just took a nosedive into how to differently handle a certain level of stress for certain things. So if you want to talk about that a little bit, I mean, I don't know what I would even do, and I'm in the states. I have resources pretty well available to me. I would cry.
Yeah. Well, like things happen, right? And I guess because like the nature of basically I had a motorcycle in second gear and it kind of got away from me and I put it down so it didn't hit anybody, but I was wearing a sling bag and it kind of nicked um the bag a little bit and it damaged. It wasn't even that big of a damage, but the mount on my 20 millimeter got a little messed up. And I only brought a 24 to 105, a 20 mil 1.8, and an 85 1.8. So you know, I kind of needed like 25% or maybe even 35% that 20 mil. I needed the 85 for like a couple of shots, maybe. I only used it like twice. but then I mainly use the 24 to 105. I'm 6'9", so I can vlog on a 24 on a full frame pretty easily. Like my arm is enormously long, so I didn't need the 20 to vlog, but nighttime or just having a smaller package than a 24 to 105, like I was relying on that lens quite a lot, and yeah, so it's just like, okay, well now I'm walking around with a paperweight in my bag that like
Right.
is worth enough money that I can't just like get rid of it because it's not broken to the point of like throw it in the trash.
Right.
And so obviously on Shargo Island I couldn't do anything, but I just kind of researched around, and there wasn't like great looking camera shops, but some of them had fine reviews, and like a lot of them were like one tech, and it was just like a dude, and he maybe had like a helper, and then there was like a shop owner, and it was always in these little parts, these little outlets and stuff in the city where it was just like they had a freaking metal like thing to shut up shop, and like there was a little 5 by 8 foot cube. And so I find this place online and I just commit to it. I was like, this is the one that I want to go to. It makes the most sense. I'm from America. I was like, Allen's Camera Shop sounds pretty good. I was like, maybe they're affiliated with Allen's Camera in Philly. Probably not. And yeah, so I talked to this guy. He doesn't really. He hasn't worked on this particular lens, but I saw that they worked on some Leica M mount stuff, and like they'll disassemble a Leica M mount. They can probably fix this better than I can. I've torn apart a JCPenney 28 mil like old FD lens and could not get it back together.
Same.
So so I was like, I'm good on all that. Have fun, friend. It was. But I mean, it was stressful. But I was like, okay, well, they're either
Yeah.
gonna fix it or they won't. The bench fee was like 500 pesos or 300 pesos if they couldn't do it, which is only about a few bucks. Um,
Yeah.
so I just said, okay, well, I guess I'm gonna do this and hope that in 2 weeks my lens still exists. Like I'm not gonna get scammed out of it. And yeah, it was fine. But um, I guess just that kind of way to start tackling issues and tackling my struggles and stuff. I was like, there's only one way to be, and it's continue, because I'm out in
Hmm.
Southeast Asia, and I don't have a similar experience to that. And I've done a lot of traveling
Yeah.
all over the states. I've done road trips with friends with like no budget, and I've done backpacking trips with absolutely no money across the country, and like none of that compared to the stressors of like jumping in trikes and like renting motorcycles and just like kind of bombing around Southeast Asia. It's a totally different experience.
And just so you guys know, I have the same 20 mil lens, and that's what this my video here is being recorded on. I adore this lens. So when he told me that broke, I was just like in my mind was like, no, no, it's a nightmare now. This is terrible.
Yeah,
So I was
it
very
was.
on edge, waiting for responses about how this was going.
Yeah, it was wild. I mean, David and I have a decent little small collection of like pretty good kit, but he and I are both in the place in life where like if we're gonna buy a lens, we probably have been talking about it for 3 months and saving up, and we're like, can't wait to get this thing.
Yeah.
So like an $800 lens is a big deal to us. Um, so again, it was stressful, but I had a job to do. I was trying to make as much content as possible, and I just had to deal with it. I had a 6500 because I was like, okay, let me trade some guitar stuff I'm not going to use for like a smaller camera that might be handy, and we'll talk about it as part of a different topic later. But man, does that last generation of APS-C cameras just lack almost every creature comfort that like obviously my A7S III has, but even if I had my A7R4, which isn't as updated as my A7S III, I would have just been much happier with. So as far as like convenience cameras and stuff go, it was I basically wasted space because I never touched that damn camera, and I could have taken
Yeah.
either another lens, or just I would have preferred to take my other big camera, which was uh, pretty bewildering because you know that's a lot of kit to take.
I do have a question for you. As much as the A65 didn't meet your standards or what you hoped it would be, what would it take for something like an A7000 to have to be like for you to want it and
uh,
keep it and use it?
I mean, I would need it to have um, at it has to have 10-bit nowadays, man. I can't play with these 8-bit files. The color, I mean, I haven't used an A6600. I have to assume that the colors are better, like they're the more modern Sony colors, but like the blue channel of that entire camera was almost useless to me. It was horrible. I don't know if it had like too much luminance like baked into it, so the blues were brighter and tealer, and just in a way that like nothing I did made the colors even like I would rather use the GoPro than that camera almost every time, and that's crazy to me because I hate GoPro footage. Um,
Can you put like a percentage of like how much footage actually ended up coming from that being used in the YouTube videos?
man, so little. I think
Yeah.
maybe 5%, and it was just because like, uh, I had happened to be shooting it before I realized how much I hated the footage, so I was kind of relying
Mhm.
on it. So I had to save a lot of footage, like crushing 8-bit files and just desaturating a lot of it, and then kind of putting a
Yikes.
LUT over it, and just like it doesn't look good, but it's fine. It's in like a montage or whatever. Like it was
Yeah.
it was bad, man.
Wow.
I would have rather used like my old iPhone 7 or something before I would have used that again for matching with other cameras and stuff like that. Um, I wasn't a fan. I'm sure I was probably missing something. Another huge thing was not having a joystick on that camera is the bane of my existence. I hate taking photos while I need to move an autofocus point with my thumb on a screen. It is not intuitive, especially on that camera. It's not snappy to me. It feels laggy and shitty, and I'm like, just give me a freaking physical joystick. I'm a DSLR guy, like I started, and like I'll never give up that that's a better way. If I have gloves on, if I have, you know what I mean? Like, give me the
Yeah.
joystick. Joystick fanboy forever.
Can we use this to transition into the next topic
That's what
so we can?
that's what I was hoping to do, which is why I brought it up.
And it's
Because
so, yeah.
so so I have a question to ask.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You were asking me about a potential secondary camera for your travels, and
Yeah.
if you check out David's channel, he does some pretty cool like making coffee in different places videos, which are my favorites so far. Um,
Yeah.
and he's in the process of getting rid of an A7 III because he has an A7 IV, and was hopeful. Everybody would just go get another A7 IV, but that's not always in the cards right away if it doesn't make a whole lot of sense while you still have an A7 III. So tell me about this camera that you said you alluded to having gotten.
Well, the fact that you don't like the, or you need the joystick, and the fact that you hate 8-bit. Unfortunately for you, I ended up buying an A7C, and I was wondering if that was what was in your mind when I told you, hey, I bought a new camera.
It was not. Um,
Oh,
it was not, but that's actually sick. So the A7C to me is one of the most compelling cameras that almost gets me to a 100%. I would have that as my everyday camera. But the thing that it doesn't have is if honestly, give that thing S Cinetone and I think I could use it.
so for me, I've been using S-Log3 a lot and learning because that's one thing that I haven't had no experience with prior to last year. Not any experience with actually creating proper footage.
Yeah.
So I've been heavy with S-Log3, and that's been fun for me to learn on. And I used S-Cinetone probably, I don't know, I probably did like 4 or 5, maybe 6 different like wildlife clips. That's what I use it for a lot, is really quick stuff for like talking to Instagram stories for the coffee stuff. Doing I use Cinetone for my 120p footage for whatever for wildlife. But that's pretty much it. If I'm doing actual proper storytelling, I don't touch it. I don't know why. I just enjoy the process of grading,
Sure.
and maybe that's all I need, for a reason. But I got the A7C because for the longest time since it came out, and then maybe I knew at one time and I forgot that it had a fully articulating flip screen. And once I was searching for like A7 IV kits and stuff, and the A7C was in like one of the listings for where I was looking, and I noticed in one of the pictures the screen was flipped out all the way, and I was like, oh, I completely forgot, which is a pretty big requirement for me. I've been using both the A7 IV and the A7 III for these vlogs, these outdoor vlogs that I do. And typically, I like to use the A7 IV to vlog with, hold it up here so I can see myself with the flip out screen. It's wonderful. which means I have to use the A7 III for photography on those specific vlogs. Not usually an issue, but on the most recent vlog of that type that I did, I was testing out a firmware update for the Sigma 150 to 600 for wildlife, which also was accompanied by firmware updates on the A7 IV, and I needed to use that for photography. So I was forced to try to vlog with the A7 III with no flip out screen. And I probably lost 30 minutes of footage of me talking to no recording camera in two different segments, and that was extremely frustrating for me to get up, walk around, and look at the and see that the camera was no longer recording and have no idea what it did or didn't capture. So that was a requirement just from that point on. And then I know there's workarounds for using like your phone to see yourself, whatever. But it's just like an ultimate convenience in that way, which makes it seem like a requirement. So I made it one. So the A7C has only 8-bit recording. I'm going to consider that a I'll deal with it for now. And when we see an A7C2, if that ever comes, I might upgrade. If it's got 10-bit, if it's got a Cinetone, whatever. However, it does have some autofocus upgrades over the A7 III, like continuous focus in video, which is a big deal if you're going to use it for vlogging. Something that the A7 III did not have. And that's not a huge issue when you're talking about a wide-angle lens and you're vlogging with basically one kind of distance away with your arm. But if I'm using my tripod, which I tend to do on those types of videos and do different types of shots with me at very different distances, not being able to rely on continuous autofocus for video is kind of difficult. So it's the A7C. It should be here in a couple of days, and I'm very excited.
Yeah, I mean that's killer. Like I said, I've flirted with that camera for a long time. I love the form factor. I had a buddy who worked at the camp that I worked at that had one, and I got to play with it a bunch. And I think for me, because my experience is mainly creating content for camp, for my current position at the job that I have, like a lot of my stuff was I just need to like get some stuff out right now, and I'm just gonna shoot some reels, and I don't really want to sit there and color grade a bunch of stuff. So Cinetone was honestly game changing for me, and I hate using game changing, but like it just looks good enough that I just make it either a little punchier or do some exposure corrections, and it crushes for an Instagram reel or for a quick YouTube video or even some of the promotional stuff that I do, because most of the work that was happening at the camp was on A64 and A6500s. So my 7S III with a Cinetone, it just looked better right away. I didn't have to do anything.
Right. Another big factor, huge factor, because I have a family. I got 2 kids. The A7C that I found was $1,000 less than a new A7 IV.
Yeah.
That's a big deal. I got bills to pay.
Yeah.
So it's going to work, and it will work, and I'm excited.
Yeah. No, I think you should be. I fully feel like I would have one if I didn't have the 2 bodies that I have, because I pushed so much of my other hobbies, like sold like so much stuff to even have the cameras I have. And I mean, I foolishly didn't get rid of the A7R4 when I did. When I was planning to, I should have just got the A7 IV when I was, when I had the pre-order. But I really, really hope they do refresh that. It makes absolute sense. Like I think in the photography space, the fully articulating still for some reason gets a ton of bad rep. I actually love the A7R5's implementation because I loved the Panasonic S1H, but barring that, as much as I would rather have the Tilty Boy on a photography camera, when you're on location and you're a one-gun guy, you can't do anything else. I don't care about your phone. I don't care about an external monitor when I'm traveling with the wife and kids, kind of situation, or like I just need to like throw a couple things in my carry-on bag and have a fully fledged situation that I know is just going to work and it's going to be bomb-proof. I try to have as little accessories attached to my stuff as I can. So I feel you.
That's the big thing for me too. It's just going to work. There's nothing extra to fidget with, and the A7 IV's implementation means that you can turn it around and face the actual LCD towards the body. I've had my A7 III, thankfully it had a screen protector on it. I just opened my camera bag up one day and the screen protector was shattered. That could not happen if the screen could flip around and actually face the body with the on the outside portion of the screen being a protecting force.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it just makes total sense.
Yeah, I like them. Like I said, I'm excited to see the A7R4 implementation on more cameras because it's just, again, I haven't used the A7R5 yet, rather, but I have used the S1H, and I do love that flippy setup. It's so good.
Mm.
It's absolutely killer. So it gives me I like to shoot waist level, and shooting waist level with the fully articulating of the A7S3 and the A7C and stuff, it's not ideal. I can totally do it. It's never been a problem, but given that direct choice, I would rather it flip just straight out from the body. So I get it, but
Yeah.
YouTube is YouTube, and you're usually shooting you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So that I mean, as far as my kit now, it's the A7 IV. I'm about to sell the A7 III. I do have a buyer who has communicated to me that they want the camera. They've accepted the price that I put out there for it and the 35 mil 2.8. The little tiny prime, and that's awesome. So I'm waiting until she's ready for that, and then it's gone. It's off, and yeah, that's the A7C, the A7 IV together, and it's between the 20 mil, my 150 to 600, the 85 FE. I like all that gear, so that's gonna work for me.
are you gonna shoot? Are you just gonna use that as your second body for weddings and stuff too, despite the one car?
Oh,
Or?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I have to. It's gonna work, and I'm sure it'll be fine. But B, what I'm probably gonna end up doing is throwing the 85 on the A7 IV, better autofocus, just a faster, better performing camera all around, and just throwing the wide angle on the A7C so it doesn't have to worry so much about autofocus, and it'll just get what it gets. It'll be good.
Yeah, I mean the raw files off, it'll be perfectly fine. There's no,
Yeah.
it'll do
Yeah.
everything that any of the other
Oh,
two
yeah.
cameras can do. So
I mean, I shot everything with the A7 III at one point while I was shooting that alongside the D850, and that's a different type of beast altogether to compare to. But the A7 III was staggeringly better at autofocus and getting the images that I was hoping to always get with weddings. And if the A7 III can do it, the A7C should be no problem.
yeah, absolutely, for sure. That's cool. Well then, my next topic that I wanted to bring up, because you and I have kind of been shooting back and forth a lot of like potential rumors, a lot of different things, but having what you have now, I want to know, what do you want to see in the camera market this year, and what are you looking to acquire? Like, what kind of tools do you think is the next step for you?
Well, okay, so if this is one thing that I bring up with you all the time, and we both have similar sentiments on why we don't have a decently good, well priced 50 mil 1.4
Yeah.
on the Sony system.
Yeah.
I mean, we have, what is it, $1,000 plus options, and we have the Samyang basically. Sigma, I've been waiting and waiting and waiting because on the D850 they had the HSM version
Yeah.
on the Nikon F mount, and I loved it. On the D850 with that 45 megapixels, that Sigma Art 51.4 was so sharp. But you're not on mirrorless, and even though it was a great overall performing camera, it's not the fastest system by any means. So what I really want is for Sigma to come out with a Sigma 1.4 for Sony natively, for it to be fast, DGDN, sharp, and I would love to see it under $1,000 to really, really compete. I don't think we're getting that this year. I think we would have heard something by now, other than the little spec sheet leak
Yeah.
that's out there, that's floating around, but who knows,
Funny you said that. We will talk more about that when I do a rumor roundup in a couple minutes. But
Yeah.
right on. So is that kind of both? Like, you're hoping to see a 50, and that's probably what your next move for your work is?
Probably. If they come out and say within the next, sometime in the first half of this year that it's coming, let's say at the second half of the year, it'll be a definite buy for me for sure. 50 mil was, I mean, on the previous systems that I've used for weddings especially, it was always 50 on one body and a 70 to 200 on another body, and then swapping the 50 out for the 20 when I needed that. And basically I could run with those three lenses all the time. Um, if I had the 50 again, I've got the 85. It would probably be 50-85 or 20-85, and just those three lenses. Because often I found that the 70 to 200 was versatile and amazing, yes, but I can do pretty much just everything the same on the 85. Um, just using my feet to zoom, which is the old saying, right? So if they announce such a lens for this year, it's a absolute definite buy for me.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I think for me, I'm desperate that we get Sony to understand that shutter angle is something that people want on their small bodies, and I want to see them go open gate, and I want to see them put breathing comp on other stuff. I'm really hoping they bring some of that to the A7S III. I will legitimately eat whatever crop they want to put on that camera for breathing compensation. Um, and I don't know that they have 3.2 sensors, so I feel like an A7S III absolutely could go open gate with how small and how fast the camera is. I'd love to see it open gate. I want to shoot open gate again. I'm from Panasonic Lumix GH5s and GH4s, so like these features I had and then relinquished when I came to Sony. And now that they're like really in the picture and the S5 II is out and things like that, I'm like, Sony better start to go, oh, now we actually have to do this. Like Panasonic has autofocus, we have to push. But will it come in a firmware update? Probably not. So I guess I'm hoping for an A7S4 or and they would be crazy to make an A7 V already, but um,
Well, either of them, right? I mean, how long has it been since the A7S III? What, 3 years now?
yeah, which is I think it was like
So,
almost six the last like gap that they had them, but cameras are
but
moving
between the
fast.
first two, it wasn't nearly as long of a gap, right? So we really,
Yeah.
if we're going to try and use trends, it's almost impossible to say are they going to wait 3 years, 6 years? Who knows?
Yeah, yeah. But I mean, each era from A7 to A7 II to A7 III was all
Yeah,
vastly different kind of markets and very different everything. So,
and
speculation.
technology pace is different.
Yeah. I think they're kind of in the situation where they can just keep releasing bodies and people will buy them and flip them and
Yeah,
do that. So I don't think it would be crazy for them to say, we heard you. The A7R5 is not the hybrid camera people hoped it would be for. 38 and 31 millisecond rolling shutter on that thing is actually. I didn't real
that's
I didn't realize
it's huge.
how bad the APS-C mode crop like video was until I watched it on a giant projector. I think I had sent you a video or a photo or something. I'd mentioned it to you on Instagram, and it was like disgusting to look at. I was like, "What am I watching?" And it was just like
Yeah,
Chris Nichols literally walking down the road, handheld, and it was just like. I was like, "Nah, dude, I'm
that's
good."
that's one of those things where it's like that's a picky thing because of all the other great things that these recent Sony bodies do,
Yep,
right? But it's one of those things where for like even amateur filmmakers,
yep,
having that rolling shutter issue is such a like deal breaker for some people, and for me even. I'm looking at it, and the A7C has just as bad of rolling shutter as the A7 III, and the A7 IV has pretty bad rolling shutter too. But they can't just go ahead and put stacked sensors in these
right,
cameras and cannibalize their A9s and their A1s. So it's really difficult. And the A7S4, whatever that's going to be, it's probably going to be. I mean, we'd have to imagine to be a stack sensor at that point, right, for the
yeah. I
A7S.
mean, if they're gonna keep it around like 4 grand, like they might as well. And so like even the rolling shutter on the A7 IV though, not nearly as bad as this camera. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
it's slightly improved to the A7 IV in crop sensor mode. Like that was my first test when I had gotten the shops back when it came out, and I was like, okay, well, it's not that much of an improvement, and that kind of made me not really care to get it because I have an A7S III. Like that's what I'm gonna pick up. I'm one guy. I can usually only hand hold one camera, and I'm tripoding
yeah.
the other, so like it doesn't truly matter. Um,
But
but
I will tell you that for wildlife, it's huge because at 600 mil, it's everything is pronounced.
yeah,
So if I try to shoot silent, electronic only on the A7 IV, everything is slanted,
oh
wobbly,
yeah,
and
yeah,
totally unusable. So
yeah.
it's for different use cases.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I mean, I shoot shooting sports, and I shoot. I've been shooting at camps and stuff like that, so soccer and water sports and things like that. But like, I could not use that camera at work. Like, none of that video footage would work for my current job. Because it's like in crop sensor mode, the readout is still 31 milliseconds, which is only 7 less milliseconds than like the full frame 8K. And I went, "Eey." And I love the AI autofocus. I love all the features. I love the back screen, like I had already said. Almost everything about it, I would love. It's got a Cinetone. Like I would get rid of my 7R4 yesterday and get it, but it's not actually going to benefit me that much. So I just would probably not use the video as much. Like it would be a
Mm,
great photo camera, but I still have an A7R4. Like what?
yeah.
So it's hard to say, but yeah, that I want to know what that next body will look like because both of the cameras that I like the most, the A7 IV and the A7S III, they're not going to get an update, I don't think. Like, probably not till 2025, I would imagine.
I agree, and it's really difficult to even speculate with how much they packed into the A7 IV. Like, how much more value can they possibly provide for an A7S IV if it's especially if it's not a stacked sensor with what you can do with an A7 IV. It's going to be really difficult for them to slap a $4,000 price tag on an A7S IV and say that it's so much more worth something like an A7 IV. It's going to be difficult.
I can tell you, I know exactly how they could do it.
Tell me.
It would be 24 megapixel 6K readout, open gate, shutter angle, eat my heart out Panasonic killer. Like, if they just did like the Ace, they'd have to have a fast. Like they already have the A9 II I think is getting a little long in the tooth too. So like maybe it just turns into there's like a super fast camera and they consolidate some of their stuff, and maybe it's $4,500 or whatever. But like I know personally so many like camera talking head YouTuber people that if that was open gate, had shutter angle, had the AI autofocus, and was 6K open gate, it's done. Because I have S-Log 3, I have S-Cinetone, I have, I don't know, maybe they do 4K cropped at 240 FPS. That's not something people have talked about, but, you know,
Yeah, it's on the horizon. It has to be.
right, because like again, it's not a resolution thing. I don't need 6K. I want 6K
Right.
open gate. That's a different thing, right? I'm still delivering to 16 by 9 and 9 by 16 4K, right? I'm not doing 6K, native stuff. I want it to
Yeah.
be open gate like that. So,
And
um,
I suppose even if, especially if they keep that megapixel count down a little bit, there's always opportunity to improve dynamic range and tonal range and
yeah.
things like that.
Well, the AI autofocus in general is going to be huge. It's going to be much improved by the time they have a video centric camera, and it's just going to be disgusting
Yeah.
when you're like, okay, well the S12 or the whatever the other S1R2 or whatever they're going to do at Panasonic comes out, there's still going to be a probably big generational gap away from whatever Sony will put out when they release that body. Um, so I digress. I think there's still a little bit of room for some big improvement. I would like to see a little bit of a consolidation to like 4R and S maybe. Um, but I don't personally use the A1 or the A9 product lines, so maybe they're not
Right.
as important. Maybe they are super huge and people still use them. But and I know a lot of wedding people that were on the A9s and stuff.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I mean, those are without S-Log, I think, and things like that. They don't really do full video stuff at all. So
Right.
um, I could see an A9 III just kind of eating the A7S IV. Which again, if they throw on the video stuff and they make that a hybrid, then whew.
Right.
But maybe I'm getting a little too close to the sun with all of those ideas. So
Well, they've certainly kind of capitalized on segmenting a price difference market with these cameras.
yeah,
It does. An A9 has never crossed my mind, even though I used to shoot 10, 15 weddings a year. An A1 certainly was never in my mind. And those are professional bodies, and there's a place for them. But you can get so much done with a $2,000 body.
yeah.
You definitely can. And today, by today's standards, the tech that comes in a new $2,000, $2,400 body gets the job done because we were doing it 10 years ago with so much less.
Yeah. Well, and then like people like Patrick Tomaso say here on YouTube and on Twitter, it's like all cameras are good. Shut up. and
Yeah.
then take some. He'll go ahead and take like 4 iPhone photos that are better than most people's. Like, I run an XV, an X100V, and like, look at my sweet photos. And he's like, all mine are iPhone, and they're better. So, um,
Oh, that reminds me. I would do. You know how close I was to ordering the ZVE10.
yeah,
Do you know how close I was when I saw just how that camera was oriented? And I was in my head going, man, I could save so much more money if I am okay with just the terrible IBIS or whatever, and if I'm okay with the worst dynamic range and the crop. And I was like making all these reasonings in my head for how this could work, and eventually I had to reality check myself and go, hey, this second body has to also shoot weddings, right? It has to be pretty actually capable.
yeah,
And from an investment standpoint, I can resell the A7C, whereas if I bought that ZVE10, it's going to be a whole lot harder to recoup the majority of that cost.
yep.
And that's what I do is, as wedding photographers, we shoot a lot, and we need to keep up a little bit with the tech that is required of some of those types of jobs. So the ZVE10 was in my mind for a hot day or two, just like looking at it. I watched the Gerald Undone video, and he's like, it's fine, it's good, it's like for what it's built for, it's fine. And I'm like, I need to use it for a little more than what it's built for. I was so close
Yeah.
to buying
I
that.
was close to getting one too. I was looking at them before I got that A6500, but I happened to be able to trade guitar stuff for that, so like I didn't put any money into that, and then I had sold it for like
Yeah.
$550. So it is what it is. But yeah, I'm with you. I often will get too hyper focused on like one problem I'm trying to solve with my kit, and then go, oh, there's this other one that exists though, Korey. Sorry, bud.
Yeah, yeah,
So I'm with
yeah.
you. Yeah, yeah. I'm excited to see like you bopping around with the form factor, because that's the most exciting part of the A7C for me. Is
Mm-hmm.
I legitimately love the form factor. Um,
Yeah, dude. If I can show you I shoot a little bit of film, and there is nothing that feels better than running around with a rangefinder style camera, quite like this Fujica, this V2. There's something so nice about the form factor of it. I mean, it's just so classic feeling. I haven't had the opportunity to play with an A7C yet, but I have this vision of what that could feel like, what that could look like, and maybe that's superficial. I have no idea, but I want it, and we're gonna get it.
yeah, oh yeah. I think they're dope. I think you're gonna have a lot of fun. Are you right eye dominant by chance?
Yeah.
Oh, see, I'm left eye dominant, so the rangefinder deal isn't actually that helpful to me. I poke the
Mm,
screen with my nose, so I have to deactivate touch like options,
yikes.
because like I'm heavily left eye dominant. But yeah, no, I'm excited because you do a lot of good little street photography and shit when you're bopping around, and I happen to think if you have a small lens on that camera, you're probably more willing to take it with you than you know
Oh, 100%.
not they're not that much smaller. It's definitely a form factor thing. It makes you
Well,
not.
you do. I mean, what is it? You drop off like an inch, maybe an inch and a half off the top
Yeah,
viewfinder. So for street photography, like I was just in New Orleans a couple of month back in November, so a couple of months ago, I would have taken the A7C in a
yeah,
heartbeat over the A7
yeah,
IV. I felt a little bit like this is a little much. It's not a big camera, but it's pretty obvious
yeah,
that this is a decent camera. The A7C would have been a little bit better for
yeah.
just bopping around
It
and
looks a
being
little
small.
incognito. It's like it's just incognito enough that you're like,
Yeah,
not bad.
yeah.
I flirted with that Fuji for a little bit, man, and we haven't talked a lot about it because I actually haven't spoken with you other than texting since I've been back. But the almost every single thing about that was amazing, and I was so happy to have a small camera, and I did shoot more, and I liked to have it with me, except for the fact that it had this tiny little dingleberry joystick that was made of plastic. It was like a little nubbin, and
You
then
want to tell us again exactly which one you're talking about?
oh, so I mean, they're all the joysticks are the same as far as I'm concerned, but besides the new ones. But I had the XE4, and I had gotten a 27 mil that I returned pretty fast, but I was running the 16 to 80, and even with this 16 to 80, that lens is a lot smaller than I had thought it was going to be. F4 is whatever, but that camera handles low light really well. Like I was shooting
Hmm.
at like 64 and 8000 ISO on a APS-C body and like making images that I liked. That I was like, these are
Hmm.
sick.
Hmm.
I loved the film simulations. Like I don't think that's like overblown at all how nice they are. They look great, and the raw files are fun to play with. So like I was shooting JPEG and raw. Most of the time I would just take the JPEG, but sometimes I would tweak them a little bit, and it was sweet. But I just like I'm already such a big guy that having like even an 85 or even my 40, so I picked up the Zeiss Batis 40 mil f2. Having that in my A7 R4, it's barely larger, especially when like I still kind of need to carry a sling bag to carry the Fuji. So the final segment that I would like to bring up is we're going to start doing rumor roundups because I am just a rumor hound. I read Sony Alpha rumors like almost every day. But at least every couple of days, I see if there's a post. I used to be crazy about Canon rumors when I was trying to hope they'd release a camera. And I'm glad I didn't hold my breath because even the R6 II isn't quite where I would need it. But
And
um,
this is the segment where you're going to teach me some things because I don't hound those
yeah.
sites often. So
Uh,
I usually I learn these things from you, and then I go and Google real quick, and
well,
then I can make conversation because I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, that's why I like it because I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw out a rumor to you and kind of suggest what
Yeah,
I feel about it, and then you can kind of just react
for sure.
naturally. So the most recent Canon-based rumor that I think is at least somewhat interesting is that they're supposedly releasing an ultra-wide zoom that could potentially be a 10 to 24 mil f4 for
Mm.
full frame, a 10 to 24 f4 for full frame. And the first thing I thought was, well, this entire lens is useless for video because their IBIS at 10 mil is going to be horrible.
Yeah, and I have to imagine distortion's going to be a concern, and the vignetting, and I mean the first thing I thought of, actually did hear this rumor. The first thing I thought of, and just comparatively in my mind, was the 20 to 70 that just released from Sony, and they're nothing alike. But I had no idea until I watched Jared Pollin's video that how bad the vignetting was on 20 on that lens. It's gnarly.
Yeah,
Nobody's talking about the vignetting on that lens.
yeah.
So I would like to see distortion and vignetting if such a lens were to pop up from Canon. And I'm sure that they have a handle on physics and how to design such a lens. But you're right, IBIS is going to be a concern for them.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I still think like I'm an old guard Peter McKinnon fanboy from like 2017 or whatever, but uh, they were in Iceland and his Iceland video has some 15 to 35 footage in it that I'm like, you thought that was okay? Like, and like I'm not trying to be like picky or like annoying or like an elitist or something, but I was like, that's like friggin' horror. Like I wouldn't have put that shot in my
Well,
cut.
here's
It's
the
so
thing.
bad.
His audience is full of filmmakers,
Yeah.
amateur filmmakers, professionals, and so there's a big, I wouldn't say majority, but a big audience of people who are gonna be picky about that. It's got to be something that he's got to be aware of.
Well, and I'm
So
sure he did, and I'm sure he probably doesn't care that much because he has addressed his criticism despite being like at some level either an ambassador or a partner or a friend of Canon.
yeah,
Um, but that was the moment, and Tyler Stallman talks a lot about how it's pretty bad too. If you don't watch his content, I actually like Tyler Stallman quite a lot, but he's a huge Canon user, but he's not gonna not be critical about any of the tools that he uses because he's a professional. Like he's making
yeah.
content for clients every single day as his primary like gig, and yeah, it's really horrible. So good luck at 10 mil because like
Yeah.
so the second and final rumor for this week is going to be that Sigma leaked a photo, and you saw the 50 f1.4 DGDN, but they also are talking about a G Master 1.4 from Sony. And so
Yeah.
my question to you is, what would it take? I know you have, the HSM kind of legacy with your kit, but what would it take? Like, say the G Master's probably definitely more expensive. I think it's going to be in the $1,300-$1,400 range, like the 3514 and the 8514 or the 2414 and stuff like that. It'll be probably less than 1,500. But if it's $1,399 and the Sigma is $1,099, would you prefer the G Master?
Oh man, it's a tough one because it really does. For me, budget is a big thing. I don't have
Sure.
tons of money to throw around. I don't even shoot that many weddings anymore. I'm shooting like 4 or 5 now that the coffee is taking over. So I have the luxury of not, defaulting to nice high end gear because I can get away with it. So it would disappoint me to see Sigma being over $1,000. It would not surprise me to see the Sony be 13, 14, $1,500. If they're that close, if we're talking about $1,100 versus, let's say, $1,300, I think I'd go Sony. It's going to have the aperture ring probably, where Sigma probably is not going to put an aperture ring on.
Sigmas will have an aperture ring.
Oh, it will. Okay, well that makes it even harder. But
Sure.
we can also probably assume the Sony is going to be faster, sharper, and that's something to consider if we're only talking about $200. Let's say we're talking about $300 to $500 difference. I'd take the Sigma because I know that they're capable now. They've been capable for a long time, and I don't need it to be fast as lightning for the couple of weddings that I do because I have plenty of experience on the HSM model getting
Yep.
the job done.
Now, what if the 1.4 from Sigma is actually nearly the size of the 1.2 from Sony, and the Sony 1.4 is close to that 35, which is closer to your 20 mil, remind you. Like, it is a small ass lens. Because that, I think, is the factor for me. If that thing comes close to the size of the 35, I don't care if it's $14.99. I'm probably going to do that because I probably will never have to buy a Sony 50 mil ever again.
Sony has been on this streak of releasing, evolutions of lenses that happen to be quite a bit smaller, whether they're lighter or not. Size is a factor, and if I was still shooting 10, 15 weddings, it would be a huge factor. But I'm only going to be lugging around that type of lens for 3 or 4 weddings this year, and I don't think it's going to be as big of a factor for me. But I can absolutely agree with you that a lot of people would be swayed if they managed to pull a 1.4 off with a much smaller footprint.
Fair enough. Yeah, I assume optically they're going to be pretty damn close. I don't really have a beef with anything that's the DGDN models. I'm using the 28 to 70 at work, the 2.8, the like contemporary, and it does everything that I need that to do at work,
Right.
which is pretty cool. So I'm sure it's going to be sharp. I would have to consider because I currently don't have a breathing comp body, but knowing that I probably will, that would make me lean to Sony because I doubt that the breathing compensation would be like totally handled. It'll be like the 35 where there will be a ton of it, but for some reason, if that Sigma is larger but doesn't suffer from very bad breathing compensation, that might be the other X factor that pulls me because I would
But
go, okay,
that's going to be tough, right? We're going to
yeah,
have to. This is my thing. Is I'm never one to pre-order basically anything. I'm always watching reviews, and I'll watch basically all of them. I'll scour YouTube for the smallest accounts who are doing reviews of some of these lenses, even if they're
mm,
not super expensive, because I want the most candid, unbiased. Here's the issue I had with this that no one's telling you type of reviews. And focus breathing isn't a huge deal for me, but some of them can be pretty bad. And if it's
yeah,
a huge difference at the at the with the trade-off being that the Sony is much smaller, but it's got bad focus breathing. But we can fix it with breathing comp. Not on the A7S III, you can't.
right.
That's a deal breaker for some people for sure.
Yeah. Well, and then you said there's times where I think you probably get to 22 or 23, between 22 to 23 millimeters when you use breathing comp on the 20. But like for me, the breathing on the 20 was pretty bad. I wasn't super thrilled about it. So
It's nothing that's ever really bugged me too much, but I probably don't have the same type of workflows and tendencies that you do that make it an issue for
sure,
me.
yeah, fair enough. Um, yeah, I mean you keep it off for your talking heads, right?
Yeah,
For
yeah, I
YouTube.
do.
Yeah, and I don't think for what you do it's distracted me, and I'm pretty sensitive to it because that's kind of like when I'm just listening and my eyes start to drift. Those are the
Yeah.
things I look at.
And I can
Um,
always trust you to tell me if there was something that bugged you, and I can
yeah,
improve based on that. And that's not been brought up.
Yeah,
So
for sure. Yeah, I don't think it's been a big deal. But yeah, interesting. I like you had said earlier in this episode, I just am like waiting for a not 51 too. It's nice. I don't know that I'd keep a $2,000 50 mil. Like it's I've been flirting with it for what, a year and a half, telling you, oh,
hmm
maybe I'll sell my 70 to 200, which is
yeah.
my favorite lens of all time, and all this other crap. But I definitely would like to see it around $1,000 bucks.
hmm
Um, if the Sigma doesn't really have any breathing or any breathing at all, I might just probably chef for the lower end one.
It honestly still baffles me that we're seeing a G Master that could be, $1,400 when they could have made a G for $800.
Well, and
It's
that's what I was saying, man. I wanted a 50-51 for even a really good 51.8
hmm
from Sony that was a G lens. They made that like 2.5 or whatever, and they have a 42.5 and a 52.5, and I don't even consider them to be like, that's really cool for street photographers
yeah.
and people that want the
There's a
small,
place
they
for those.
an A7C with that, if you're like always at a 5.6 or something and you just love street photography and really candid stuff, it's
hmm
epic because it's a tiny lens, especially because you don't need the goofy hood on it. You could just run it raw and it's real tiny,
hmm
kind of like what you want from that Zeiss that you have, but it's
Yeah.
just a little long in the tooth, a little old,
Yeah.
right? The optical quality, but yeah. So fingers crossed for that because that would probably round out my kit for a while. This 40's nice, but I'm actually starting to see F2 be a limiting factor for it being a prime for me.
Hmm.
I do a lot of low light at work and stuff like that, and I could use the 1.4 for sure.
But you're right. If we were to see even a 51.8G, let's say it was 6, 7, even $800. If I ended up watching tons of reviews that just go, yes, it's a 1.8, but it's amazing. That's fine. But
That's
they
that's
just
two
haven't
hundred
done it.
bucks. It's $200 less than 1,000, right? So it's under your budget, and it's only a third of a stop. If it was sharp and did what you needed, you're saving $200, and it's a great
Right.
lens. So
I've shot vlogs at ISO 10,000. That
yeah,
is one of those things where if the lens is quality all around at the cost of 1.8 versus 1.4, there's something to be said about that because they can deliver an amazing lens in a
yeah,
lot more people's price ranges.
yeah,
I
yeah.
just wish we saw something like that.
Yeah. Plus 1,000 gets really tough even for me who's using these every day for work.
Yeah.
So I'm with you. But yeah, thanks for finally getting this started. I'm excited. We'll talk about the second episode. I do not know if this will be monthly, if this will be bi-monthly, if this will be quarterly yet. But I think we're gonna try and shift this onto YouTube. I'm at a temporary space. I move into my actual apartment in April, so we'll probably give it a few episodes before we start to really hone in on how we want the episodes to be. But if you're still listening, thank you so much. In the show notes down below, I'm going to have all the links to David and my social media. Check out his coffee, check out his photography, check out some dogs that I post. And and I'll talk to you or see you, or we'll yap at you next time. You can go ahead and
Yeah,
sign
man.
off if you'd like to, David.
Yeah. I just want to thank everybody for listening. If you're watching, if this ends up on YouTube or wherever, thanks for watching. And just like Korey said, you can find our information below. And if you want to be a part of the coffee community, if you're a coffee nerd, I'd love to have you over there too.